hard to imagine, but 12 years ago, we had 100,000 people occupy our Capitol. ALEC was unbelievably helpful in terms of not only providing the intellectual ammunition to counter these just out of control attacks, but really to have trained the leaders.
Over 10 years ago, before we passed right to work and promoted worker freedom in Michigan, nobody thought we could do it in Michigan. Well over 10,000 protesters come to the Capitol from unions trying to bully and stop the legislature from making those reforms.
Brave politicians stood up and elected officials stood up for worker freedom. That's the power of ALEC. One of the main issues that we have in the labor space is the problems with this outdated model of collective bargaining. You have these one-size-fits-all contracts that institute this adversarial relationship between unions and management, and in the public sector, between, frankly, unions and taxpayers.
Collective bargaining was this thing that, ironically, originally started in Wisconsin. So Act 10 was simply this idea of taking power out of the hands of the big government special interests and putting it into the hands of the taxpayers. Our reforms have saved state and local taxpayers more than $15 billion.
Before the right to work reforms were passed 10 years ago in Michigan, all workers were required to be in a union, whether that union was serving them well or not. We were one of the states that led the nation in terms of people leaving. Our incomes were dropping considerably. We were losing jobs. Once this reform was passed, this freedom to work reform, we started seeing major increases in terms of the number of new jobs created in our state. Now, 10 years later, we have an increase in people living in our state. So when you look at the model that Michigan put forward 10 years ago under Governor Rick Snyder and Republican legislature, it was based largely on a lot of these ALEC policies.
Well, the great thing about celebrating ALEC's 50th is you've been pushing these big reforms for literally decades. Yeah, when I was first a lawmaker, ALEC was the go-to place, and it always has been long before I was there, and it has been since.
That model legislation has actually opened the door and exposed these issues to legislators from across the country and really helped gain momentum for those pieces of legislation to get introduced that bolster worker freedom.
I am confident that ALEC is going to be there for the next half century and beyond, helping state lawmakers and government leaders at the state level make those sorts of positive reforms for many generations to come.